Hello and welcome to the Marketing Times Analytics Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Sofronas, and today we're on with Olivier Labbé. Olivier, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me on the pod. My name is Olivier, and I'm a recovering go-to-market leader. Been at this for a while now and got to work at a couple of really cool companies. Early stage has been my specialty. Most of the companies I've worked in are in the MarTech space as well. And now I'm doing some consulting for early stage startups.
I guess starting off more broadly, how have you seen go-to-market strategy change for businesses, maybe by B2C or versus B2B during the years?
So my specialty has been in B2B exclusively. Over my time, I've realized that B2C tends to always be ahead of the curve. B2B has always tried to keep up. And if you look at the ABM space, which I spent quite a bit of time during my time at FlipTop, which was a predictive account scoring, predictive lead scoring company over 10 years ago, and then spent some time at G2 in the intent data and metadata most recently, which is also in that same sphere of account-based marketing. There's improvements that are done year over year, but most of the time you're seeing these B2B companies are learning from what's happening in B2C and they're trying to adapt. Obviously, the TAM is much larger. If you look at B2C, if you want to sell a pair of shoes, there's a lot more buyers, but the cost per transaction is much higher when you're doing B2B, specifically if you're doing enterprise software. Just the time to buy keeps getting longer and longer. And one of the things that is happening right now is that there's a lot of new companies that are building new companies on new infrastructure, specifically where they can have AI at the core of the infrastructure. And I'm seeing some difficult times ahead for a lot of these B2B companies that were built, let's say 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, what are some of the changes that the maybe more advanced B2B companies are embracing that are making them adaptable?
Yeah, one is data infrastructure and automation. The system of record as well, I think is critical. If you look at what Snowflake has been able to do, you can track a lot of information based on known and unknown users. And new companies are leveraging AI at the core and the machine learning application. And I think the big thing is, aside from the infrastructure side, is that they haven't raised as much, right? The old days of scaling companies, where I was a part of, let's say G2, and when we scaled to $1 billion valuation during my time there, we fundraised a lot and we hired a lot of humans to do the work. And now what you're seeing, I was looking on LinkedIn today, there's some posts about all these companies that are getting to 50, 100 million ARR with a fraction of the number of employees. They have 10, 20, 50 employees, and they're able to get to 100 million ARR. In the old days, which is only like 5, 10 years ago, you would need a lot of humans to get there, especially on the go-to-market side. My specialty is building sales teams, and we needed to hire a lot of people. But now, if you hire a go-to-market engineer early on that can connect all of the data, can evaluate the best tools, and then essentially create workflows that the employees can leverage to 10x their output. That's one of the main differences that I'm seeing.
And now, a quick word from our sponsor for this episode, Adverity. Is your marketing team drowning in data? With so many platforms and sources, it can be overwhelming. If you're spending more time organizing data than analyzing it, you're not alone. But what if you had a solution that makes your marketing data work for you? Introducing Adverity, the platform that helps you build a unified and accurate data foundation. Adverity integrates and transforms all of your marketing data in one place, allowing your marketing and analytics teams to spot trends, optimize performance, and drive results faster. No more guessing and no more data chaos. Just insights that matter. Trusted by global brands like Amex, IKEA, and Red Bull, Adverity has helped businesses gain a competitive advantage and unlock their full potential. Ready to make your data extraordinary? Visit adverity.com and book your demo today. That's Adverity, ADVERITY.com, because your data deserves better. Thanks. And now, back to the episode.
You mentioned that a lot of your job was hiring. What are you looking for when you're hiring great sales individuals?
Yeah. So a couple things. Grit and curiosity have always been at the forefront of what I look for. And by that, I'm looking for people who have had experiences where they've been challenged early in their life. So whether they were, excellent students, or they were really good at sports, or they came from more background where they didn't have as much financial freedom and they had wanted to prove themselves that they can get to a better place. Those types of individuals who had been able to display resiliency always were top of mind for me. Sales is a pretty tough job. You get rejected quite frequently. And I want people that can get back up. It's a numbers game at the end of the day. And so as long as you are doing a good job of putting in the work and clearly articulating value, not always asking for things, right? I always train my team to lead with value and become a former consultant to their business, to understand their needs, how they're measured, and bring value to that. So one is grit, and then the other one is curiosity, right? Not everyone is curious. I like people who read books just for fun because they want to get better. I like people who nowadays are leveraging AI tools and making queries and to some of the different OpenAI or Perplexity or so on, like how do you use it? Why do you use it? You have the ability now to have all the information at your fingertips. And before these LML models came out, you had to, do your own research on Google, right? You have to do a lot of the searches, but now it's way easier. You can just open up OpenAI and ask some questions, and then you can get them to do all the research for you. So it's a huge time saving. And what I'm really excited about is what's happening now is agents, right? And so you have all these companies that are creating agents. And so the agents are not only able to give you the information, but they're able to take actions on those. And that is what I'm seeing a lot of companies do right now, is the ability to create these agents.
So speaking of agents, what is your take on the whole AI SDR and just generally inputting AI agents into the sales process?
Yeah. So the big thing here is what works. So the conversion rates have been going down. Email is now, in some cases, doesn't work nearly as well as the phone. I'm seeing people who are able to leverage the phone get better conversion rate than people who are using straight up email. But what is going to get people to respond is if they see that you've done some research. And so it is possible to automate workflows where there's some personalization, but I haven't seen any great success stories out of that yet. You can leverage signals, right? And so if you think of intent data, first party data on your website, or if you have a PLG motion and you have product data, you can create some form of personalization. And so it could work. But at the end of the day, I don't think it works nearly as well as sending really tight emails based on the individuals where you show that you've done your research, you understand their business. One of the cool things, though, that you can do now at scale, and it shows a form of personalization, is videos. So you got companies like SunSpark, right, where they'll let you create a video and then they'll embed the company name in there and it looks legit. I think that's pretty cool. Video is definitely very engaging and it helps people to want to respond. If somebody sends me a video, I will respond because it looks like they put in the work. If they just send me an email that looks like they've sent it to 50 other people, I'm not going to respond to that. But if you're able to engage on several platforms, right, whether that be Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, what have you, and you're also sending emails and you're sending customized content, then I feel that most people are going to respond at some point.
And then when you're talking about video, is that an AI agent video that's speaking, or is it just the salesperson?
Yeah, it's a human. It's a human. I would not be inclined to respond to an AI agent video. Maybe some will. I would look at is this a real person? I look at their LinkedIn profile and so on before I respond.
Mm-hmm.
But it's getting pretty good. Deep fakes are getting pretty good as well. So it'll be interesting to see. I think there might be a future where you can't tell. If you look at their history on the internet, you can probably tell if it's a real person or not.
That makes sense. What about the signals that sales uses to understand who they should be reaching out to, who might be in the consideration phase? How have you seen tools to predict the buying stage of a prospect
Yeah, so
improve?
there's a few. There's data sources out there. You have World and G2. And so those are third-party intent data signals. And so that gives you insights into who's researching specific categories of software. It'll let you know how many people at the company are researching. It won't let you know who the people are, except our B2B, which is pretty cool. That one is able to let you know. And so my recommendation is you get a few of those data sources and you try to aggregate it and create a better intent signal. So you have the third party, then you have your first party. So people coming to your website, people engaging with the emails that are sent, or people attending webinars, or your product usage data. So if you have a PLG motion, whoever is going into the product and checking it out, doing a free trial, I think is important. I'm a huge fan of self-serve or self-guided demos as well. And so there's 20 or so companies doing that now. And you put that on your website, and somebody goes in, they want to see what the product looks like. They want to go through a tour. They get the ability to do that. And so you should definitely share that information with the sales team. And then whatever marketing is able to generate. I'm not a huge fan of asking for a demo for anything, right? I do think that companies need to have a form of what is an ideal profile look like, ICP, and then having plays based on that. But if somebody just goes to your website, I don't think you should be asking them for a demo. I think you should be asking them if you can share additional information or just start delivering value to that individual before you ask for something. The thing about these self-guided demos that I like is that there's a bunch of stats that are going around, but now it seems like by the time somebody engages with a vendor, they're like 3/4 of the way through the evaluation process. And so I think it's integral part of marketing to promote our content, to have a cool brand and make it easy for companies to engage with the product without having to talk to somebody. And then if you make the short list, hopefully you can do a good job during the sales process to get them to consider partnering with your company.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that take before, but it does make sense that you want to make sure you're delivering more value up front before asking for that demo time. What are some other maybe pitfalls that you've seen in the go-to-market strategy for companies related to that maybe lower funnel stages?
Yeah. So my specialty's been early stage, right? I've done the 50 million ARR run. I've done 2 to 15 and so on. And so I am a strong believer that 0 to 1 should be sold from $0 to $1 million in ARR should be sold by the founders. They're going to be able to sell the product better than anybody else. They'll be able to take feedback and adjust the product roadmap, so on and so forth, to get the product to be something that is needed in the market. Now, once you get there, one of the major pitfalls I see is that you will have CEOs then hire what they want, which they think is I should get a VP of sales, but it's too early at that point to get a VP of sales. Or they'll go ahead and they'll hire somebody that has worked at a large company or sold a product with a big brand, think like LinkedIn, Salesforce, and so on. That is a major issue, right? Because those individuals are not as resilient and they're not used to selling deals where no one knows your product internally, right? And so you have to be really good at selling the vision and leveraging internal resources to show that you can handle the demands of the prospect. And so those are some of the pitfalls I noticed earlier on. And then if you're, maybe in the 5, 10 million plus range, enablement is usually the main area of concern. A lot of companies are not investing in enablement early enough. And that means that you're hiring people that are not doing a great job on calls. And then the last thing I'll mention is when you're trying to scale, you will create models, right? So we're in February right now, and a lot of companies over the last few months have been doing their models, right? What does 2025 look like? If we were to try to increase revenue by 50%, then how many account executives do we need to hire to get there? And if you don't have enough demand for the product, hiring account executives is going to be a huge waste of money. And you should only hire when all of your account executives are at capacity. Furthermore, you should make sure that all the account executives are A or B players. And if you have C players, you should cut those out before you hire additional people. And in the old days, I noticed a lot of companies would just look at spreadsheets and be like, all right, the investors want us to be at this target by this time. And let's figure out how many people we're going to hire to get there. And it just doesn't work that way anymore. Now, efficiency is critical. And if you're not in a company that has an AI component or an AI first software company, you can't really raise any funding anymore. That's what a lot of VCs are saying. They're only investing in AI companies. And so efficiency should be at the top from a CEO's perspective. It should be the most important thing.
Yeah, I'm curious just your take on companies that place AI at the center of the business versus kind of adding AI to their existing business. Which one do you think is more resilient in the long term?
It depends how big the company is that's adding AI, right? And so if you're looking at companies that are doing hundreds of millions or plus in revenue, they're adding AI, yeah, fine, they're going to be okay. But if a company is not over 100 million in recurring revenue, I don't think that they're going to have a really hard time. And the reason is that the infrastructure is, so if you think about a Salesforce, right? So Salesforce is going all in on agents, right? And so their growth has been somewhat limited over the last few years, but now they're hiring a bunch of salespeople, calling Agent Force, and it seems to be working. But the infrastructure of Salesforce is archaic in some ways. So if you look at, there's new AI companies that are CRM AI companies. And so you have companies like Day.ai and Adio and Coffee.ai, and those are AI-based CRMs. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. But if you think about the old way of being a salesperson or a customer success manager, of you run a call, you write your notes, you go back into Salesforce, you get through your notes and so on. Well, these new AI first CRM companies, everything is in, all the notes are in there. All the stages are updated. You don't need any of that work. And so that's pretty cool, right? That is saving an enormous amount of work for those individuals where they don't have to spend an hour, 2 hours a day entering notes into a CRM. Salesforce is essentially just a database that you have to do manual entry in. And so there's errors, there's missing information because a lot of salespeople don't input all the information. And so I think these new CRMs are going to make it much, much easier where they can track what's happening on the website, tied to a user. And so all the information is going to be updated in real time. And you will be able to, as an executive team, make decisions on where you should place your bets in the future. And I think it'll increase the quality of happiness of the employees because they don't have to do things that they don't want to do, which is manual data entry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, in a world with more AI agents, do you see there being less of a need for humans in the sales process?
For sure.
Or, yes?
Yeah, 100%. I think, and the other thing is I was talking about efficiency. A lot of companies are going to be able to grow with fewer employees. They won't have to raise as much money from VCs, which is going to make them have the ability to like just grow when it makes sense and not try to grow too fast or make big bets that will cost the company millions of dollars in hiring and then terminating because we didn't hit the targets and so on. And I think overall it's going to be much better for the markets, the users, the software buyers, because they won't have to spend as much money on software because the cost to produce and maintain the software will be much lower than before. And so I remember buying sales enablement software, and the old legacy sales enablement software essentially like Google Docs. And then you would have some kind of tracking to see, did the person watch the video? They answer the questions and so on. How much time did they spend? And I think that, is very expensive for what you got. And so I'm very much looking forward to seeing, aside from the CRM tool, what else is going to make it easier for employees to up level their game. And I think that from a employee count standpoint, one of the metrics that's been really important for VCs in the last couple of years is revenue per employee. And if you're like $100,000 range, you're like, you're fine, pretty good. 150 is, is really good, 200 and so on. Now we're seeing some companies like $1 million per employee, right? That's impressive. And those companies will have the benefit of not raising money if they don't want to, and just growing organically as the market demands.
Yeah, interesting. How do you think the competitive landscape will change between companies in an environment where people can start a business with so much fewer resource requirements? Do you think that will ultimately promote more innovation? Do you think that there are any consequences to that are negative? Maybe the businesses that they're building are less resilient?
I do think the barrier to entry has shrunk, right? So in the old model was, you come up with a minimal viable product, an MVP, you get a seed round of funding. And if you are a entrepreneur who is not good at pitching VCs or didn't have the relationships, it was really hard for you to build a company. And so now you can build an MVP. You can do it with just a couple of people, right? So the amount of code that is needed to build software has been very time intensive. Now you could just, there's tons of websites. You can go to something like a Replit and you can basically, not knowing much about coding at all, you could just tell them what you want and they'll look at other softwares and then they'll just recreate the similar code to that. And so now you can easily create a product. So the barrier to entry is much lower, which means that you're going to have a lot more competition. And so if you have, and like I worked at G2 for years, and if you look at certain categories, you look at their grids and there's 100 companies on there. I think that's only going to go up now because the barrier to entry is so low. And so it's good for people wanting to buy software, right? And because the cost is going to go down, but the revenue per customer is also going to go down. And I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but it is much easier to build software than ever before. But selling it is going to be much harder because there's so many different vendors in the market. And so I think the ones that are going to do well are going to do a couple of things. One is they're going to invest in their brand. I think that's critical. You need to have a brand, and your brand should be fun. It should be cool. And from a marketing perspective, you should be giving away value, all right, whatever that is, playbooks or guides and things like that. Creating content, right? Doing a good job of promoting things on content online. Gong did an amazing job going from a very small company when I got to know the founders to where they are today. They leveraged their product to gain insights into the behavior of buyers and sellers, and then they would produce content that was really good for these sellers to engage with. And they leverage LinkedIn. And so you can pay for LinkedIn. Obviously, it's an expensive channel, but it works pretty well. Targeting is pretty good. But if you're able to leverage your employees internally to create, some content and promote, that's free. And so that's another thing. Influencers also. And so there's a lot of people there that have a lot of followers and you can essentially pay them. This is a brand new within the last few years. Again, cuts with B2C, right? It is now in B2B. And then you have these influencers and they can give you access to their networks and, hopefully you can convert some of those. I think having a PLG motion is more important than ever, whether that be 2 weeks or a month or a free tier forever, which I'm a huge fan of. And then you limit or you gate some of the functionality that is premium to get them to convert. And HubSpot obviously has done a remarkable job doing that over the years. And now a lot more companies are doing that. So I think that's another strategy that I think will differentiate, companies that can do well in this market.
Yeah. What makes it easier to sell to companies or to
Yeah.
prospects when there's a PLG motion?
Yeah. So it gives them the ability to play with the product. I want to see what the UI looks like. Great. I want to see how easy it is to connect my current tech stack to this product. And can I do that? Yeah, that's great. Now it is limiting in that PLG products require a huge time investment up front to see the value. And so that's one of the components that I think makes it hard sometimes, because if you are tasked with finding a solution for, let's say, you need customer success software, or you need support software, right? You could do a free trial of 4 or 5 different tools, but that's pretty time consuming. And so it's not ideal, but it gets you into the product and you can play with it. And if you like what it looks like and how it feels, then you can ask for a demo and you don't have to talk to the salesperson, right? Early in the process. In the old days, we used to train salespeople on not showing the product, doing a call or 2 calls of discovery, understanding the needs and the pains of the buyer, and understanding who's going to be part of the decision making process and gaining access to power and doing all of these requirements. So salespeople have some qualification training. So you can use BANT, which is pretty simple. It's budget, authority, need, and timing. But then you have MedPick, which is a lot more involved. And these account executives were trained on, you can't see the product until I've gone through and qualified you. Obviously, that doesn't feel good, right? And if you're the buyer, right, you have to answer all these questions before you see the product. And yeah, I don't want to do that. That's not a good use of my time. So if you have a PLG motion, those people can basically circumvent the salesperson to see what the product looks like. And I think that's what buyers want. But the critical component here is it's very time consuming. And so you're only going to probably do 1 or 2 free trials, even if you want to evaluate a handful of different vendors. So I think that's the value of PLG. But again, this is only good for products that are maybe sub 20 or $50,000 a year. Anytime you're getting to $250,000, $500,000 deals, you're going to need a sales engineer to get involved in the sales process. They're going to need to build you a customized demo based on you as the buyer and your needs and so on. And that sales process goes from a couple months now to 6 to 12 months. And it's a lot longer. And it depends what you're trying to optimize for here as a business. Are you trying to get as many customers to get their hands on the product, or are you trying to close deals for the most amount of money possible?
That makes sense. So speaking of sort of ways to improve that throughput, PLG is one way to do it. Another way might be incentives. What's your approach to incentives? What maybe it's different offering structures that are customized. Maybe it's discounts for multi-year deals. What's your approach? What have you seen work, and what do you like to stay away from?
So discounting, obviously it can work, but I don't like when companies bring up a discount on a first call or even the second call, right? Discounts should be the last thing you do if you have identified a need, they're a good fit, they have budget to do this. And now it's just about timing. Is it going to be this month or next month or the month after? And maybe you can incentivize it, but that should only be done as a last resort at the end of the sales process. Don't discount ahead of time. I like to package the product in a way where you have different tiers, right? And so you have your free tier, which is limited, but it gives you access to it. But if you don't have a free tier, you can have a starter, tier, which will cost maybe a quarter of your full value. And you have some functionality, and you can limit it based on usage. You can limit it based on seats. You can, or feature and functionality. But I like when pricing, there's a step up where you can get the buyer over time to get to that higher tier. All right. I'm a huge fan of trying to maximize net retention. And in order to maximize your NRR, you need to have a really sticky product, or you need to be able to upsell customers. And so if you structure the deals where you're trying to get the most value out of them, and you sign them on a 3-year deal, and then they come in 6 months later and they're like, this the AE sold us something that doesn't work, and then it's just shelfware. That's not good. And the people in the market, people who bought the product will never buy that again, but then they're going to tell all their friends that this is not a good product. As a buyer of software, I want to buy a 1-year deal, and I want to have the ability to upgrade to extra functionality if there is a need. But first, I want to get the value out of the first purchase that I made. And hopefully, they didn't sell me everything up front. They sold me what I needed. And then by building relationships with my team and these individual contributor or whoever is using the software, then they can tee up the additional functionality that would make our life better at a premium cost over time.
So speaking of getting a better relationship with the business, I'm curious about what's the entry process? Like, how do you determine who to reach out to at a company? Is it just feedback loops of what's worked in the past? Are there tools that can help inform what types of roles to reach out to? How do you approach who you're reaching out to?
So it depends on the stage of the business, right? And you will have ideal customer profile, right? It's called your ICP. These are companies that we think are a good fit. For one reason or another, they could be hiring, they could be they're shopping around. So there's intent data signals for that. And you have closed, let's say, dozens, if not hundreds of customers. And your best customers, the ones that renew all the time, they fit this parameter, right? So they're in this industry and this geo, they have this amount of employees and so on. So that's the first thing you need to figure out. And there are tons of data sources out there. A company called KeyPlay, which I like, that can help you figure out what your ICP is. And then the next step is understanding your persona. So who is the person that you're helping day to day be more efficient? And then who is the buyer? Who do they roll up to? Right? Whose budget you're going after, so on and so forth. And so you have to understand, clearly identify your ICP and then the personas that you want to target. If you want those product marketers, as an example, or you have directors of sales, or you have VPs of engineering, or you have CISOs, right? So you have all of these different groups of these companies. And what you need to do is understand their pains. So, and this is the type of content, if you're a marketing company or if you're in a marketing team at a tech company, you have to understand the persona and you have to understand their pains. And that's the kind of content that you should be generating. Because people are still going to go to the internet to do searches and queries. And if you have a lot of content on your website around how you solve specific pains, then you're still going to get traffic. Traffic is going down for a lot of these review sites. Even HubSpot, they've always done a great job of creating content. Their traffic is down, right? And that's because people are going to OpenAI and they're going there first. And so they're not going to the internet. Still, majority of people go to the internet, but you have now a huge early adopters movement where they're now going to these platforms to save time in terms of search. And SEO is having, I would say, some kind of form of renaissance right now, because just generate a bunch of content is no longer going to ensure that people can find you. And so that's why earlier in the call, I mentioned that you need to diversify your marketing strategy, where you're creating content and then you're leveraging different social platforms to promote this content as much as possible.
Have you seen a lot of success with content syndication? I've
No.
heard no, yeah, me neither. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, because I know a lot about that space, because while I was at G2, I was tasked growing the revenue team and so on. And we had a website that was getting some traffic. And we had some people that would, and on G2, you had profiles. And my job was to build a team that would engage with these marketing teams at the companies and say, hey, you have a profile on G2 Crowd. You're getting hundreds, you're getting thousands of hits a month. Let's talk about enhancing the experience and let's get you to upgrade. All right. And then came up with the concept that, hey, if we could track IP tracking and we could tell them which companies are researching them. And all of a sudden, people now really cared, because I could go to Salesforce and say, did you know that Procter and Gamble and Boeing are researching Salesforce? They're like, what? I had no idea. I'm like, great. These people are coming to our side before they go to your side because they want to. And so we did that motion, and that worked really well. But the reason I bring all of this up is I was trying to get more leads for my clients and my prospects and say, so I tried to leverage this intent data and share it with some organization that have their own websites where people go and do research, and then they can submit information for more information. And I've tried many of them. And for the most part, the people that were registered as leads didn't remember asking for information on it. All right. And so it's very low quality. And so I don't think it's a good use of time. Now, fortunately for the industry, over the last decade, a lot of the larger companies would have lead quotas. Right? Now we've moved away from leads at all costs to then it was MQLs. And now it's like revenue and opportunities and so on, right? Which I think is how you should measure marketing, right? Lead gen, to me, is a waste. You should be doing demand generation, and you should only count demand from companies that fit your ideal customer profile, your ICP. And so these tech companies have been modifying how they are tracking the effectiveness of marketing. And it's much better now than it was before. But you still have these large companies that are measuring their marketing teams based on lead volume. And as long as you measure marketers based on lead volume, their content syndication will have a place. But the conversion rates, all right, the historical data that I've looked at, and I've looked at a lot of it, you may be lucky if you get 1% conversion rate on lead syndication leads. That's not worth your time.
Yeah. So what's your recommendation in place of content syndication? Because one of the things that I thought was worth testing was if you're paying, let's say, $250 per lead from a content syndication vendor, what if instead of paying a content syndication vendor, you host the webinar on your website and you put a bunch of ads out that drive traffic to your webinar and you self-host it? Do you think that would be more effective than just paying the content syndication vendor to get the traffic to the webinar?
Yeah. So historically, I've seen that webinar leads convert higher than content syndication. The thing is like, how much are you going to invest in that? So if you're going to do webinars, my recommendation is you get partners involved, right? Think about your ecosystem and think about other companies that might be larger than you, that have a good brand, that don't compete with you, and you don't foresee them going in to compete with you in the future, but you're targeting the same personas, right? And so partner with a couple of them. So you have 2 or 3 people now on this webinar, and that way you get their list, right? You add your list, and then everybody wins. So I think that would be a much, much more effective way. Now, there's also these, I mentioned G2, but then there's also Gartner. So you have Gartner properties, and they have lead gen solutions as well. And so you could be a good fit to look at those, because some of those will actually convert at a pretty high rate as well. And I would definitely be looking at that. G2 also came up with a lead gen solution now as well to compete with the Gartner properties. Capterra. So investing in Capterra and some of the other companies that Gartner has purchased over the years, they have a lead gen component, and I've heard some good news about the conversion on that. The other thing is Google Ads probably will convert better than that. It is more expensive, but with Google Ads, you can put in certain parameters as to the type of companies you want to. But when your budget ends, similar to Capterra, right? When you're done spending for the month, you're going at the bottom of the list and everybody else gets access to it. But you can decide when you want to bid. And so don't bid on the weekends and so on, or holidays, and maybe just do it from certain time of day on specific days of the week. But I would much rather do it there. And then the other thing is like content. Like I would be creating a YouTube channel, right? It's not that expensive. Like it is time. You can hire an agency to do it. But I'd much rather a company invest in their brand than spend any money in content syndication.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, if you have the interest and the awareness, then you can leverage that to share out the content rather than trying to force people into the consideration phase with content syndication.
Yeah. And you're not getting executives either, right? They're not the ones going and submitting information on websites to learn more about something else. they're going to their communities, they're going to their networks. And another piece of advice for companies out there is build a community. You can leverage Slack or Discord, but build a community and get your buyers to come be part of the community, and so that they can network with other people, and whatever their needs and their pains are, they can figure out who to engage with in those community. But I think that a lot of companies wait way too long to spin out communities, and it's a really great way for the early adopters at a company that I like this product, I'm a huge fan of it. Oh, great, let's get you to be part of community via Slack or wherever, where you can engage with similar people to you. And that works really well. And then once you get big enough, then you can go and do events at either trade shows you're attending or dinners, right? In certain geos where you have clients and you have prospects and you get them all together. That is one of the most effective ways to build a brand and bring value to your customers.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you so much, Olivier. This has been an amazing conversation. I've learned a lot about the sales process with you, and I really appreciate you joining.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Thanks for
Awesome.
having me.
Absolutely. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk to you soon.